I'm Hugh Hewitt on a great day. It appears though we're going to have peace in Gaza by Tuesday of next week. More on that. I begin the show, though, with Congressman Ro Khanna, Democrat from California, one of the Democrats I love to talk to because he's smart and he engages. Hello, Congressman. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate your being here.
Hugh, thank you for having me back on. Always enjoy it.
All right. Now, I want to get to the shutdown, but before I do, two quick questions, but they're hard questions. Don't want to ambush you, but they're hard questions. Virginia Attorney General Democrat nominee Jay Jones has issued texts have been revealed in which she suggested the Republican speaker should have 2 bullets to the head, maybe even indicated that the children should be killed should that man, Jay Jones, drop out of the race.
Well, it's horrific. There's no excuse for it. I fully condemn it. And yeah, I mean, I haven't followed all the details, but if he was actually saying that, I certainly wouldn't support him.
Thank you for that. Clarity, finally. Secondly, have you seen the videos of your former colleague, Katie Porter, walking out on the CBS reporter in Sacramento and then exploding at her staff? Have you had a chance to see those yet?
I have. Look, it wasn't her finest moment. I view that, I'm sure you view that as different than calling to kill your opponent or their family.
Oh, yes, very.
It wasn't her finest moment. But I give people some grace in terms of we don't judge people on their worst moments. There have been other politicians who walked out. I haven't ever done that. Certainly would never do it with you, Hugh. And I have differences with Katie Porter, but I try not to be someone who just beats up on folks when they're down. So let's see how she handles it.
So do you think she has the temperament to be governor of the Golden State? There are a lot of Democrats running, like Javier Becerra, et cetera. Does Katie Porter have the temperament to run the Golden State?
You know what I would do if I were her? I would hold a open press meeting, 2 hours, invite folks, conservative, liberal press, others, apologize for how she acted, explain why she lost it, what the moment was, be transparent and try to regain her trust. But I think she has to prove that she has the temperament. Have we all had bad moments? Yes. But now she's got to rebuild that trust. And certainly there's no excuse for not answering basic questions. I mean, that was not a tough question. The first question you asked me was a tougher question than anything she was asked.
Oh, good advice, by the way. Good advice. I hope she listens. Now let's get to the policy.
Did you come on your show, Hugh? Would you have her on?
I know, she should. She was my congresswoman. I actually had left California by the time she defeated Mimi Walters, but I would have been a constituent. I'd love to spend an hour with her, and it would be fair. She's a law professor like I am. We'd have fun. Congressman Khanna, the government is shuttered. I've got kids in the military, and they're officers, and they can handle missing a paycheck. But they have E1s and E2s that can't. And I hear about these E1s and E2s who are living on $2,300 to $2,700 a month. They can't miss a paycheck. Should the government be reopened?
Yes, but Hugh, maybe you can call on this to happen. Why can't we vote today on paying the troops? In every other shutdown I've had, we have votes in the House and the Senate to pay the troops. The House has been out of session. We haven't been here. Someone said to me, when the government shuts down, the House members should be locked into the complex, and the senators should be locked into the complex until we get a deal. But we should be at least voting on the troops. And you could call for that. You could call for the speaker to convene us today, tomorrow, to have a vote on paying our troops.
And my response is that's not necessary because 13 times in the last 2 years, Democrats and Republicans together passed a continuing resolution for 7 weeks to get the appropriations process done. It's been passed by the House. It's in the Senate. Democrats are getting killed politically for this. So what's your advice to your colleagues in the Senate? Not in the House. You guys got beaten by the Republican majority that just won election. What should the Senate do given the circumstances right now and the fact that the House is out?
Well, I disagree with you on the political impact of it, but I think people, you know why people don't blame the Democrats? They see They say the Democrats is not having enough power in Washington. This is a case where you got Donald Trump, who's basically gotten his way, the Senate and the House, and they're saying just get the government open. What I've said, and I'm consistent on this. You may disagree with me on the policy, but I've been consistent against the filibuster when Biden was president. I'm consistent now. If you could have an exception to the Senate rules of the filibuster to confirm Trump's presidential appointees, if you could confirm Trump's judges with 51 votes, tell me why we shouldn't have a rule in this country that you can keep government open and have a continuing resolution with 51 votes. Nowhere in the Constitution
I'll tell you
does it
why,
talk about the
Congressman,
filibuster.
I opposed Harry Reid when he broke the filibuster the first time. I supported Mitch McConnell and John Thune when they used the same option given the Harry Reid precedent, but that's about nominees. There's actually a constitutional argument, you know well, you're a Yale-trained lawyer, that the Senate has an obligation to vote on advice and consent on nominees, and they shouldn't be blue-slipped. Long argument, but it's different from legislation. This is a clean deal. This is a clean CR. How many clean CRs have you voted for in your long and distinguished career? 30?
I'm sure I voted for a bunch. I've been in Congress 9 years. But the point is, we should come to a look, just like there's a budget reconciliation. Why is that not subject to the filibuster? There are exceptions to the filibuster. My guess is if you ask the American people, do you think that we should be able to pass a budget to keep government open with 51 senators, or do you think it should require 60 senators? The vast majority of people will say 51 senators. The only people who believe still in this filibuster thing are the people who from a different era in the Senate.
Oh, yes, I'm a Madisonian. I'm very much a Madisonian. I want to slow down legislation, but the world is as it is right now. I don't want the nuclear option right now. No one's put that on the table in the Senate because that means expanding the Supreme Court to 14 and adding 5 Republican justices. Would you like that, Congressman?
I don't think they'll do it because I think the American public won't let him do it. Look, FDR, yes, tried to do it. He was probably the most popular president of the 20th century. He couldn't do it.
Democrats tried to do it. When you get asked if you run for president and you get asked to raise your hand if you're in favor of killing the filibuster, are you going to say yes?
I am. I've been consistently opposed to the filibuster. I think the problem in our politics, and we have a respectful disagreement, is that we're not doing things fast enough to be able to build things, to be able to help places that were deindustrialized develop, to be able to keep government open, to be able to getting things done. And to me, the filibuster is one of those tools that has made us dysfunctional.
Aside, do you want to expand the Supreme Court? It's the end of rule of law if that happens. It's like a nuclear arms race to third world status if we expand the Supreme Court. Do you want to do that?
Well, I've been for term limits on the Supreme Court. What I've been said is every president gets two appointees, and you can still be a judge. The Constitution says you'll be a judge for life, but you can have senior
we might
status
agree
and
on
go to
that.
circuit court.
That's a constitutional amendment. We might agree on that because I don't like them serving past 75. Let's go back to the shutdown, though, Congressman. Those E1s and E2s are not entertained by us talking lawyer talk. They have car payments and kids at home who need food. Should the Senate reopen? That's the only option between now and missing a paycheck. Should the Senate reopen the government?
We should, and we should just get either they should just do with the nuclear option, as you call it, or they should extend the healthcare tax credit so that people's healthcare premiums don't go up. Or what I believe is let's just vote to make sure that the troops get paid. I mean, how do you explain? Let me ask you this, because Johnson's been asked this. Massey and I have 217 signatures on the petition to get the Epstein files released. Adelita Grijalva gets sworn in the day we have votes. She could be sworn in a pro forma session. Johnson doesn't want to do it.
Congressman, you're really good, but you're ordering off the menu. You went to the Italian restaurant and you want dim sum. There's only one thing on the menu, which is opening the government or keeping it closed. What should it be?
Well, yeah, but this is the fallacy of the excluded middle. You can't just give someone 2 options. You know this from your law school days. But obviously, to keep the government open. But the best option would be let's vote on paying the troops. But tell me this Epstein thing. I don't know where you are on it. But why don't we just get this 218 signature? Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying swear Adelita Grijalva in. Nancy Mace is for a vote on this. Lauren Boebert is, Thomas Massey is.
You
We've
may
got
be
two
shocked by
already.
this, but those three Republicans are not ever been on my show, ever.
Really?
They are not coming on my show. Ro Khanna has been on this show about 10 times more than those three combined. So you may be shocked by this. I just want to
I
get
am
the
shocked
government
by it.
open. Ro Khanna, it's always good to talk to you. Thank you for your candor on Jay Jones and Katie Porter. And we're going to get there on reopening the government because you guys are going to lose as long as you don't pay the troops. That's just friendly advice to a guy like Congressman Ro Khanna from California. Thank you.
Each day, our case to fix health care and end the shutdown gets better and better, stronger and stronger.
Morning. Welcome back, America. That was Chuck Schumer earlier today. Stronger and stronger. I'm joined by Noah Rothman, senior writer for National Review. And before we get to the big news out of the Middle East, Noah, I just want some continuity with Ro Khanna. Is it getting better and better for the Democrats every day?
I think it's pretty stagnant from the Democratic messaging perspective, but I can't help but notice, and I wrote about this today filling in for Jim Garrity in the Morning Jolt at National Review, that Republicans are sending a lot more signals to Democrats that they're feeling the pain and discomfort more than Democrats are. I mean, John Thune talking about having a standalone vote to open the Pentagon and fund military salaries is a blink. I don't know how you register that as anything other than a blink. And the president and the administration have not doled out the pain that Russ Vaught advertised at the beginning of this shutdown fight. They've been pretty reserved, in fact, commendably reserved. If you were a Democrat or a centrist, you would say, well, Republicans haven't pushed any major buttons here. This is, good for them. But at the same time, Democrats get the signals that they are winning this argument, and at least the court of public opinion. And I find it hard to argue with them. I can't quite explain what the Republican Party's restraint is, why it's happening.
I
It's been
can.
unsatisfying
I
from my
think the
perspective.
messaging is superb from the leader. And I've asked every single senator, and they're lined up to come on the show about the E1s and E2s, and they all know it's very, very powerful. So what Leader Thune is doing, what Jen Kiggins did in the House, was introduce a bill, but the House isn't in session, to pay the military. And by focusing on that, it focuses the attention of all the American people on the people who are screwed the most, the people who can't quit. You can't quit the military even when you don't get paid. You can't just leave and go get a job at the car wash or at a restaurant or doing anything. So I think Thune is smart, and I also think it's smart not to give them any other storyline. You heard Ro Khanna. He wanted to talk about anything except the military getting paid, right? I think he changed the subject 6 times.
Yes, I heard the end of it. The Epstein files came up, FDR's administration. I was waiting to hear about Cactus Jack Nance and his opposition to court packing. We were going to go deep. But we got off the off ramp there. I'd love to see more Democrats squirm. That's all I'm saying. And I haven't seen Republicans really put the screws to them yet.
Okay, we'll go to that. Now, talk to me about the deal. I have listened to the commentary podcast of Viv Reddy Gore, Dan Senor talking to Nadav Eyal. I've got as much reaction as I can without prefiguring or pre-guessing what you think. What do you think?
Well, I've been saying that the plan, the Trump 21-point plan, is good as a document. I've never expected that we would get very far beyond stages 1 through 6 or 7. Certainly right now we're at probably stage 0.4. We're not even at stage 1. So far, the indications are pretty good that we're going to see the end of the kinetic phase of the post-10-7 wars. And if you look at the state of play, over the course of the last 2 years, the Israelis have achieved both tactical and strategic victories that were pretty hard to even conceive of at the outset of this war. We could rattle them off: the decimation of Hamas, the ring of fire around Israel that was there before 10-7, the destruction of the Iranian nuclear program, the end of the Syrian regime, the buy-in, especially of first of all, the end regionally of the two-state solution. The two-state solution is a fiction in the region. It exists in the hearts and minds of in capitals like Ottawa and London and Paris and Berlin, but it is a dead letter in the region. And when it comes to this peace plan, the strongest part of it is the regional buy-in, the stakes that have been established by governments in places like Jordan and Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Indonesia and Turkey. I mean, places you wouldn't even expect to sign on to this thing say, A, we have a stake in the future of Gaza. B, the Palestinian Authority needs to commit to some unspecified reforms before it can ascend to leadership over the Palestinian territories, whatever those may be. That's nice and open-ended. And ultimately that Israel maintains a presence in Gaza indefinitely, and that's legitimized by these governments that have signed on to it. So the shape of the region has been changed permanently. We don't know how that will evolve.
Data points
in
for
the near
you.
Future.
The guys I listen to the most, Ambassador Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the United States. My age has been doing it as long as I've been broadcasting diplomacy. Haviv Reddy Gur, who's the superstar of Israeli media, who's emerged. Nadav Eyal, a critic of Netanyahu. Amit Segal, generally a supporter of Netanyahu in Israeli media. Those are for Israelis. On the American side, everyone on the Commentary podcast and pretty much everyone I follow on X are celebrating the end of the war, which has exhausted Israel, on Israel's terms. Like a 100% victory, not unlike 1991 when we thought we had won, but we had not won. So the worst it could be is our winning in 1991 when we hadn't won. What do you think?
Yeah, there are unforeseen conditions. We don't even know the contours of how this peace will unfold. So we have no idea what the casus belli of the next war will be. And it would be foolish to assume that there has been peace in the Middle East. We just simply don't know what the next war will be and how it will look. But we do, and you can be disquieted if you're an Israeli supporter who said on October 7th or October 8th that Hamas needs to be destroyed, scattered to the winds, not just an end to it as the preeminent political and military force on the Strip, but anathematized, exiled, gone forever. The Israeli victory here stops short of that outcome, and you can be disappointed in that. You can be disappointed in the lopsided moral equation that is Israel releasing 2,000 or some detainees, prisoners
it's
who are
250.
detained for reasons.
It's 250.
Yeah, to say, but then there were more than 1,000 civilians that have been captured and detained by Israel as a result.
Okay,
of
all right, but the 250 people in prisons. Noah, last minute.
Those are terrorists. Yeah, I mean,
what
happens? But
happens?
the same applies to the civilians.
What happens after Hamas fires one rocket? Someone pops off with a Katyusha after the deal and the hostages are home.
Well, that's a good question. Most likely, I would think restraint would prevail. And I would assume that because my concern is that Washington and the Trump administration in particular will be protective of the deal qua deal. They will not want to disrupt the narrative that there has been a semi-permanent establishment of a durable peace in the region as long as these points are followed and the progression is unarrested. And I think that there is going to be a temptation to ignore the facts on the ground as you present them if they arise and say, listen, this doesn't derail the peace deal. The peace deal, uber alles, it's never going to fail. So
Okay,
that's my concern.
I have the opposite
and frankly,
opinion.
it might be a smart decision. You know, if this is only just one errant rocket, then it is something that Jerusalem can afford to not ignore, but contextualize and compartmentalize.
I think the opposite. If they break it, they break it. All deals are off. Noah C. Rothman on X. I continue to read and look forward to more of your reaction as the deal unfolds. Thank you for joining me from National Review. Got to remind everyone, I'm in the Relief Factor studio, and I didn't do anything today except listen to podcasts from Israel about this a remarkable deal, and had to get smart for the show, so I'm a sloth. But I'm still taking my Relief Factor, even though I'm a sloth, because I do it every day. Because I won't be a sloth tomorrow or the weekend. I'll be getting lots of miles in to make up for being a sloth yesterday and today. And that usually means if you take 2 days off and then you go long, that you get minor aches and pains. Not going to be the case because of Relief Factor. Relief Factor really does work. The only supplement I have taken for more than 20 years. I've been taking it for 12 years. I've turned down dozens of offers of lots of money to take other supplements, and I will not do so because Relief Factor works. Give it a try to get rid of your minor aches and pains. 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, or go to relieffactor.com. Get the starter pack for $19.95, less than $1 a day at relieffactor.com. What a great week for AM 1370 WHEE, the talk of the town in Martinsville, Virginia. to join the Hugh Hewitt Show universe. And it's a big universe. We got 400 affiliates, and I'm glad for every one of you. And I'm especially glad that my home state of Virginia knows not to vote for Abigail Spanberger because of me, and that Jay Johns ought to get off of the ticket. You shouldn't vote for any Democrat at any time, but especially when they're repulsive people like Jay Jones. And that's, if you even think those thoughts, you need therapy, not elected office. Spanberger lacks the courage to say that. Ro Khanna didn't, which is why Ro Khanna is a serious man, though he's a Democrat. I want to remind everyone as well, old affiliates that are new, the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews sponsors this annual fund drive, especially on October the 7th, and they're close to it. What a great day to celebrate the appearance of peace in Gaza. It's tentative, it's agreed to. The hostages will be home on Monday and Tuesday. Congratulations to everyone involved. Prayers for the families who are waiting. Prayers for those whose hostages did not come home. I thought of the parents this morning who've been on this program, all of the families who've lost loved one, 914 IDF soldiers who died in Gaza since Hamas invaded on 10/7. There are lots of needs. The International Fellowship of Christians and Jews delivers meals and comfort to the poor and the elderly. They place bomb shelters in the most vulnerable areas. They provide bulletproof ambulances. They donate life-saving equipment to hospitals. Celebrate the peace by making a donation to the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. There's a banner at the top of HughHewitt.com, or call 800-492-1717. I just checked the number, 1-800-492-1717, or go to HughHewitt.com and find the banner. Let me also tell my new listeners and my old, if you're moving, if you have to refinance, if your bills are overwhelming you and you've got equity in your house, call Andrew Del Rey and Todd Abakian at andrewandtodd.com. They are lenders. They did my loan when I moved from California back to the Beltway. They've done Dwayne's loan. They've done tens of thousands of loans over their long life as lenders. They're a bank. They are the best in the business. They'll spend as much time with you as you need. They will tell you when not to do a loan. They will tell you whether to do a 15 or a 30-year loan. If you've got one of those great 3% 30-year loans and you're hanging on to it despite the credit card interest rates you're paying, despite your car payment, walk through the math with them, let them do the math. Don't overpay for a house. Don't buy too much house. Don't buy too little house. Talk to andrewandtodd.com, 888-888-1172. If you're a first-time home buyer, very good people to work with. You might qualify for an FHA loan, and you might want one. If you're a veteran, you don't have to put anything down because you get a veterans loan, a VA loan. They do those. They also do reverse mortgages for senior citizens 62 years and older living in their primary residence. Give them a call, 888-888-1172. Finally, I was talking with Ro Khanna about negotiations once the government reopens. Here's what I want the Republicans to get if there is indeed any negotiation. The appropriations process is complicated enough, but if Democrats want something or the promise of a negotiation, the Republicans ought to go visit axpc.org. They're a sponsor of mine, the American Exploration and Production Council, and I said, come on in. All I did for 30 years in the practice of law in California was get permits from the federal government to do things, among them oil and gas production and gas lines. Very hard to get permits. The complexity of the National Environmental Policy Act, the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Water and Clean Air Act, combined with the California statutes or the statutes of all the states I worked in, make it impossible to get things going, especially the extraction of oil and natural gas that we need to power the future of America. AXPC.org has put together a plan. They've taken it to Congress. We can have both environmental safeguards and coherent permitting policy so that we can get the energy we need for the future. Common sense reform. Cut bureaucracy, protect the environment, get permitting made rational. That's AXPC.org. AXPC.org. They are a fabulous, fabulous sponsor. As is, by the way, Consumer Cellular. I want you to save money in this segment as well. Call Consumer Cellular right now, 1-800-411-4454. Remember my code HUGH25. You can go online at consumercellular.com as well. but call 1-800-411-4454. Something special for my listeners who are 50 years and older. You're going to love this. 2 unlimited lines for just $60. That's only $30 a line. Unlimited data. It's an easy way to manage your cost of living, cut down on essential expenses. Do not wait. Get real savings without the sacrifice. Use my promo code HUGH25, whether you call 1-800-411-4454 or go to consumercellular.com. Remember Hugh25, consumercellular.com/Hugh or 1-800-411-4454. Let me introduce you to the next governor of New Jersey, Jack Ciattarelli. Jack, welcome. My friend Joe Piscopo tells me you've promised him an off-ramp or a rest stop will be named for him after you win. Is that true?
Joe's got a great memory with regard to certain things. Yeah, rest area on the Parkway.
He said he wanted the Parkway or the Turnpike because he didn't want one of the lower things. So I tell him that you're delivering. Jack, I'm very excited about this. New Jersey needs a Republican. How does it feel?
It feels really good, Hugh. I mean, all I have is 2021 to compare it to. I thought we were going to win then. It was awfully close. But this time the energy is electric all across the state. And tonight I'm going to be endorsed by another very prominent Democrat. And we've already racked up about a dozen of those. Not a single Republican has endorsed my opponent. But when you start getting the endorsement of Democrats around the state who are prominent, it's saying something.
Well, she's kind of falling apart, but I want to focus on you. Number one, your website is in the lower third, jack4nj.com. I assume that Democrats are dumping tens of millions of dollars into this race. Do you have what you need to stay competitive?
You bet we do, Hugh. I mean, we've matched them dollar for dollar on the regulated side. I don't know exactly what's going on with the independent expenditures. All I can tell you is there's a whole lot of Ciattarelli stuff on the TV and pointing out who she really is. She likes to portray herself as a Jersey girl. She's not. She hasn't been here all that long. And she likes to portray herself as a centrist to moderate. She's anything but. So we'll just continue to tell New Jersey who she is, and we'll deliver a win in 25 days.
Now, a lot of my guests who are from Jersey and then go into New York to do their business for media stuff tell me the number one issue is property taxes, and the second issue is property taxes, and the third issue is property taxes. Have they got this correctly nailed?
Well, they got 1 and 2 right. Number 3 right now is electricity. Everybody's bill is going through the roof. And that's because of what's happened here in New Jersey with the failed policies of the current administration, all of which my opponent has endorsed, including doubling down on wind off the Jersey Shore, which nobody wants.
So what can a governor do about property tax rate? I mean, there's a lot you can do about energy. You can build facilities. You can bring energy to the state. What do you do about property taxes?
50 to 70% of anybody's property tax bill, Hugh, is the school tax. There's the municipal portion, there's the county portion, but 50 to 70% is the school tax. And the reason why it's so high is we have a very inequitable distribution of state aid to our school districts. The more state aid you get, the less you have to tax. So I can lower property taxes with a better school funding formula. That's exactly what New Jersey gets on day one. We'll no longer be taking care of the districts, the schools in those districts that have been dominated by Democrats for years.
So how do you manage to get a fair shake out of Jersey and especially New York media, which is the latter is especially left-leaning?
Hey, we've gotten more than our fair share, but I think what you have to do is prove that you're viable. And because of the closeness of the race in 21, people are paying close attention. I have no complaints whatsoever with the attention this race has gotten, and I in particular. And the other thing is I don't duck the press. My opponent ducks joint appearances left and right. She ducked out of another one this morning. She has refused the third debate that was going to be hosted by CBS Channel 2 out of New York. I think New Jersey likes a hardworking guy.
Oh, that's a tell. That's a poker tell. When someone dumps a debate that they've agreed to, they're not winning the debates and they're not winning the polls. They're trying to hang on. Does that make you feel pretty good?
Well, what makes me feel pretty good as well was last night was the second debate, and all she did was lie. She's lied all throughout this campaign. They're getting more vicious. They're getting more outlandish. That's not what a leader does. And so we're just going to continue to do what we're doing. What she has done all throughout this campaign is based her messaging on 3 things. Lies about Ciattarelli, disdain for Donald Trump, and she can fly a helicopter. The people in New Jersey are growing very weary of that. It's not going to fix anything here in New Jersey that needs fixing.
What Joe told me is the Annapolis scandal has dinged her up pretty badly. I don't know much about New Jersey politics. Has that played in New Jersey?
She has based her entire political brand on being a Naval Academy graduate and serving in the Navy. But here's what we now know. There was a cheating scandal, pretty well known in the Naval Academy in the early 1990s. She was part of it, and she was punished. She wasn't allowed to walk in the graduation ceremony, and her name was not listed in the graduation ceremony book. That's pretty severe, and that's a fact. She has said it's because she didn't turn in classmates who were cheating. I don't think that's the case. I think she either cheated or she lied to investigators. All she has to do is approve the release of her disciplinary records. Only she can do that to come clean on exactly what it is that happened. She's going around bragging that she's the most transparent candidate of all time. Well, if that's true, then come clean on what went down in the Naval Academy when you were there.
You know, Jack, my son-in-law is an Academy grad. My brother-in-law is an Academy grad. Her story doesn't make any sense. Has any Academy grad stood up with her and said, yeah, that's what happened? Because that's not the Academy way, as I understand it as a civilian.
You're exactly correct, Hugh, and more people since the debate have been coming out to talk about what they think really happened or what they know happened while I was there. But again, it can't possibly be the explanation she's provided. And if it is, then prove it. If what she's saying is true, the disciplinary records should show the exact same thing. Approve the release of the disciplinary records.
All right, last question, Jack. What's your turnout operation going to be like? And is the early voting the thing that dominates in Jersey? Did this stuff about the Academy break too late for early voters?
Not at all, Hugh. And the very, very positive sign here in New Jersey is thus far, Republicans are returning their vote by mail ballots, those who do vote through the mail, at a greater rate than the Democrats. And the last year in the Trump race here in New Jersey, more Republicans than Democrats participated in the early voting. So I'm telling you, if we go into Election Day virtually tied based on vote by mail and early voting, we're in great shape. And with regard to those polls, we've got a number of polls that show it as a dead heat or me with a 1-point lead in a state where traditionally Republicans underpoll. We're in a great position. We just need to finish strong, and we will.
And what do you want to do on day one, Jack? I'll call you governor after you win or governor-elect, but what do you want to do on one day? We have 1 minute.
Executive order number 1, no town in our state will be a sanctuary city. We will not be a sanctuary state. Executive order number 2, we're bringing back to work our state workers. They've been working from home post-pandemic. It's been a disaster. Executive order number 3, we're pulling out of Reggie. The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is a carbon tax policy that has screwed New Jersey over and over again. We get out, I save $300 to $500 million a year and get electricity rates down.
You should be elected on that platform alone, plus your opponent's it's scurrilous what she's allegedly not done and had actually done. Jack Chitterelli, thank you. Good luck. Keep coming back. Jack4nj.com, Jack4nj.com, Jack4nj.com. Sign up, help him, give him some money. We'll talk to you again as governor-elect. Thank you, Jack. President Trump held a White House gaggle before a cabinet meeting today. He had this to say about Chuck Schumer, cut number 1.
But Chuck Schumer proclaimed this morning that every day gets better for them. No, every day it's actually getting worse for them. And they're having a rebellion in the Democrat Party because they want to stop. And if you saw all of Schumer's, I watched last night like 10 different times over the years, he said, you can't shut down government, you can't shut down, and now he's the one that shut it down. So this is a confession that he's acting not to serve the people, but to serve the partisan interests of his party.
And then cut number 2.
Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and the congressional Democrats are holding the entire federal government hostage. I will tell you, a lot of Democrats want to get this thing open too. They do. They're calling us, and they just want to get it open. And all we're doing is saying, just play the same thing until we get it straight. And they don't know how to go about it. I mean, and the problem is we really don't know who the hell is leading the Democrats. You have this AOC. I don't know her at all, but I watched her the other day. She said, well, if they want, they could come to my office. That's not leadership, you know. The only one that challenged her actually was Nancy Pelosi, and Nancy's not looking too good. I don't know what happened to Nancy, but she's not looking great.
I got to tell you, if you listen to the beginning of the commentary podcast today, it's a fabulous podcast. Jonathan Chancellor is guesting today. They talk about the deal, but they have an ad at the beginning, which I'd never heard about. I'd never heard about the Hamilton School at the University of Florida. So I looked it up, and I'm sorry Ben Sass is no longer the president of the University of Florida, or I'd write him up and say, hey, Ben, or I'd say senator, because he was a senator, I'd like to be on the faculty at the Hamilton School. It looks like they're going to try and do a mini Hillsdale College, but it's going to be warm. It's not in that state up north. Hillsdale is the greatest college in the United States, but it's still in that state up north, and it's way too close to Ann Arbor. This is in Gainesville. I think I could persuade the fetching. Now, it's not a law school. I sent a note to the High Point dean of law and said, hey, I'm looking for a new law school on the East Coast because I'm tired of going back east and west, and maybe that'll work out. I haven't heard back from him. But Hamilton School teaches undergraduates, so if you're on the board of directors at the University of Florida, the trustees, Hugh Hewitt wants to teach your undergraduates the framing, the history of American law and government, and do it like I've been doing it for 28 years at Chapman. I want you to know as well, Ro Khanna, my interview with Congressman Khanna has now been posted over at hughhewitt.com, where he calls for Jay Jones to drop out. Generalissimo, I misspoke his name. I said Jay Johns. It's Jay Jones. Can you go back and change that in the transcript for me, please? I'm very proud of Ro Khanna for doing what no other Democrat has done, calling on Jay Jones to drop out of the Virginia race. But again, you folks down at the Hamilton School at the University of Florida in Gainesville, I'm for sale. I'll stay bought, too. A lot of politicians are for sale. They don't stay bought. Faculty members are often for sale, but they will stay bought. I'm for sale. I will stay bought. But your school sounds like a pretty good place. Jake Tapper is here to talk about his brand new book, Race Against Terror. He worked the Caddyshack reference into Race Against Terror, so I had to give you an homage for that, Jake.
You always
Welcome.
do that. You're very good at that with the soundtrack. I remember when we did the interview on The Outpost. Any music or cultural reference in that 500-page book you used in a bump in, it was fantastic.
We're going to do the same thing when we come back for the second segment. But let me start with a little bit of a discussion here, framework. This is a very good book for non-lawyers, and it's a very good book for lawyers who've been engaged in the debate about whether or not the war on terror is a war or a criminal justice proceeding. Jake is a neutral in that. He's just reporting a story that ended up on the criminal justice side of the ledger. But Jake, last night I sent a note to Andy McCarthy, who I'm sure you know of if you don't know him personally, and I said, Andy, you're going to want to read Tapper's new book, Race Against Terror, because it's Exhibit 1 on why we ought not to criminalize the pursuit of terrorists. Because Spingool ought to have been at Gitmo like in day one, and if the Italians said no, we ought to cut off aid to him or something like that. Do you understand that's going to be half the reaction to the book?
Yeah, and I wrote it neutrally for that reason. In fact, you have in the book a lot of people prosecuting this terrorist because that's the best way that they can think of with the rules as they were in 2011, 2012 to get him off the streets. But as you know, at the very end of the book, the judge, who was a Bush appointee, Judge Kogan, he basically says what you just said, that he didn't understand, that he thought it was kind of a show trial, Obama showing off our ideals in a way that wasn't necessarily required, that Obama was the president and he could have done whatever. So, I mean, but I wrote it just as a story for people to interpret however they wanted to. So I take that as a huge compliment
It's down the middle. And Judge Kogan's a new hero of mine for calling Jess Ghanem completely out to lunch and unqualified. I read that with great delight. But let's go back and back up. There's a firefight in Afghanistan on April 23rd, 2003, in which two great Americans, Jared Dennis and Ray Lozano, are killed. And this book is about the guy who killed them. And what else do we need to set up at the beginning? That's kind of the framing I want people to understand. Two Americans, great Americans. One is a young kid, sweet boy, I think one of your protagonists calls him, little bit green, very country. Have I got that right?
Yeah. Jared Dennis, 19 years old, from a Native American kid from Oklahoma. A little country is a good way to describe him. And he volunteers he joins the Army before 9/11, and his family supports it because it's a way for him to get some direction. He's kind of directionless, and his family is worried about what's going to happen to him. Not really that uncommon a story, especially before 9/11. A way to save his life, to join the military.
And the tragedy is he loses his life in Afghanistan while being engaged in an attempt to flank the enemy, the terrorists who had come in. I'll come to Spin Goal in a second. But I sort of summed it up when I sit down after finishing a book. At one point, a guy named Bert LaCroix calls a guy named Major Drew Nathan in Grand Forks, North Dakota in October of 2012. It's almost a decade after the murder, the firefight. Yeah. In order to get to NCO Dwayne McKnight in Victorville, which is in the high desert of California, to obtain a brown Quran with a zipper, which is in his footlocker, so that it can be given to an unnamed FBI agent. And then LaCroix forgot about it and didn't send it to the forensic lab for weeks or months. I can't quite tell that detail. That's just wild. Did your head explode trying to retrace this stuff?
I mean, it's such an interesting story. When I heard this story for the first time and all the details about the sleuthing that the Americans, the assistant U.S. attorneys, and the FBI agents and the others endeavor to prove a case in 2011, 2012, 2013, to prove that this Al-Qaeda operative killed Americans, like you say, almost a decade before in 2003. And the meticulous detail and the investigative prowess they demonstrate, it's really remarkable. And they knew they had to draw an inside straight, and they did, and they were able to build this case. I don't know how much it's replicatable for every terrorist that kills Americans abroad. And this is the first and only, as of right now, the first and only foreign terrorist tried in a U.S. criminal court for killing U.S. service members in a battle zone, in a war zone. But it really was just such a remarkable story of sleuthing and a fight for justice, even if one thinks that terrorism should be confined to Gitmo and military commissions and not in the U.S. criminal justice system. The U.S. attorneys, the assistant U.S. attorneys, the FBI agents didn't have that option because A, it was the Obama years, and B, as you note, Italy was not going to turn Spingool over. They took him into custody. They were not going to turn him over if he was going to go to Gitmo or a military commission or if the death penalty were on the table. So they were kind of dictating the terms. But in any case, they did this remarkable job. And when I first heard the story from Assistant U.S. Attorney Dave Bitcower, I love police procedurals. I love Cold Case, CSI, all those shows. And this was that, except real, true, on an international scale, and to lock up an Al-Qaeda terrorist.
And it's going to open the eyes of everyone like me who thinks they actually know a lot about how the government does this, because I was at Justice for a while, and I've read the books and I followed the story. But here's how much I didn't know. I didn't know much about Brit. In fact, you need a scorecard to keep track. I ended up doing a scorecard. Brit, Shrev Ariel, they're AUSAs. You've got Ari Maharis, Roshana Mohammed, they're FBI agents. You've got Brett LaCroix, who is an Army counterintelligence civilian at DOD, 7 years on the case. Jim Hodgson, U.S. Army Criminal Investigative Division. John Ross, Bobby Losada, and then we've got the good guy psychiatrist, Mark, I can't find his name here, Mark Mills. There are 20 people. The amount of time that goes into nailing Spingool for this murder, what do you imagine it is just in terms of hours spent by this American team?
Oh, I couldn't even compute. I mean, it starts in 2011 when Spingool is picked up by happenstance on this cruise ship that's been commandeered by Berlusconi during the Arab Spring to bring thousands of refugees from the southern Italian islands to the mainland. And he just happens to ask an Italian Green Beret for water, and the Italian Green Beret just happens to notice bullet scar in his arm, and ask him how he got them. And he says, I got them fighting Americans in Afghanistan. I'm with Al-Qaeda. I don't belong with these refugees. And then it just proceeds until 2018. So that's 7 years of deep investigative work by a cast of dozens of people, and trips around the world, to Nigeria, to other places, to prove this case against him. I found it just so interesting. And again, whatever people think of how the war on terror should be prosecuted, these people are, patriots, and they were doing what they could to bring justice for these two families. Jared Dennis, you mentioned him before, a little bit country. He would write home and call home and talk about how the Afghans in the little area near Firebase Shkin, where they were headquartered, right near the Pakistan border. This is early in the war. That he would see that he got a kick out of the fact that they didn't brand their animals; they would dye them. So you'd see a bunch of chickens that were pink or whatever. And Rashana Muhammad, the FBI agent, she kept a photograph of a pink chicken on her desk to remind herself of this sweet boy that she was fighting to bring his killer to justice. So there are emotional moments like like that in the story that I learned that I just, that really made me feel very good about the country and the people who try to keep us safe.
Oh, the backstory, and you were careful to include at least a couple of pages of backstory of each of the good guys. I think I appreciate that the most because there are so many people involved in the war on terror and they get no attention at all. And there are a lot of people who are going to say, that's me. I also didn't know about Domex, Domex,
Oh,
the
I didn't
database.
either.
Yeah. Tell people about that. It's wild, and I'm glad it's there.
Yeah, me too. So Domex is basically a creation of the post 9/11 world. If you imagine in your mind that last scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the Ark is put into a crate and shoved into a government facility, a warehouse somewhere, that's what Domex is, except it's digital. It is every bit of information picked up from a battlefield or an FBI raid or a CIA raid. And it's to help people fight the war on terror. And using intelligence and using information collected from the enemy, dates back centuries when it comes to warfare. They had it during World War II. It's how they were able to fight the war against the Germans and the Japanese. I'm sure they had similar things for Americans on the other side. They had it during
Pause
Vietnam.
for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to go to a break. I'm coming back with Jake
All right.
Tapper. I got
Okay.
another segment on this book, Race Against Terror, available now at Amazon. If you care about the war on terror, if you read The Looming Tower, this is an adjunct to that. Go and get it. Springsteen is also in Race Against Terror, Jake Tapper's new book about spin goal. Now, Jake, I want to make sure we're talking about Domex. Let's finish that, and then let's tell the story of spin goal. I don't want people to feel sorry for him. However, no one should be sodomized by a Coke bottle in a Libyan prison for 5 years. Yeah. So that's part of his journey. But I don't want anyone to feel sympathy for him. But finish Domex and then tell people the outline of the baddie.
It's a database with all sorts of information when it comes to the war on terror. And Jim Hodgson is this Rain Man-esque character in the book who's a real person. I saw him last night at a book event. He just has one of these brains that just remembers everything. And he was just a huge resource for the assistant U.S. attorneys when it came to, that person, I remember this memo, and then he could go on the computer and get a copy of the memo, and maybe there's a fingerprint on it, or maybe there was, all sorts of information. But it's collecting those dots. Again, like an unlikely patriot, this guy, Jim Hodgson, he's, when you think of an NCIS investigator, you probably think of Mark Harmon or something, and he is not that, but he just a huge asset in fighting the war on terror, just in terms of information.
Now, spin goal represents the problem that we have, which is immense. There are tens of thousands of spin goal. This is one. Yeah. At least we know one story well, and he's not a top guy. He's sort of a sad, tragic case. Give the quick background on him so we can talk about what we do with the other 100 million of them or 100,000 of them that are out there.
So his story, as you note, is probably not that uncommon. His parents were from Niger, but they went to Saudi Arabia for pilgrimage and never left. And so they were basically raised in indentured servitude. And Spin Gul is this, at the time he was not called Spin Gul. Spin Gul, that's his nom de guerre. Spin Gul basically had no foreseeable future. He didn't know what to do with his life. And in his childhood, he hears these glorious stories of mujahideen, of jihadi fighters. And at this point, those stories are about people who beat the Soviets in Afghanistan, people who fought the Russians in Chechnya. And so he's inspired to join jihad. He basically gets recruited by a Saudi government official in the neighborhood who himself was something of a legend. Next thing you know, he's on a rat line headed to Pakistan. Next thing you know, he's with a bunch of other disaffected or zealot young men learning how to fire guns and blow things up in the Al Farouk training camp in Afghanistan. And this is all before 9/11. And you touch on an issue here, which is that his story is really not that uncommon. A young man doesn't know really what to do, has been raised in an extremist version of Islam. Somebody gives him an idea, this might be fun. This is the best thing you can do for your religion. If you die, then your family gets this money. And he has nothing else to do, and he ends up in this camp. Now, I think Spingool was a zealot, but there are probably other guys in that world who are just disaffected knuckleheads. And there are probably other guys who are just really, really violent, and this is a path for them. And it's not all one type of person. I think Spingool is probably very common in the sense that, like, maybe if there had been something else for him to do, he wouldn't have ended up a terrorist.
And there's a line which I think you wrote. There's a fine line between zealotry and insanity, and the task of the prosecutors and the investigators is to prove he is a zealot and not insane, and that is a classic criminal justice story. Now, our friends at Gitmo are down to 15. There are only 15 people left at Gitmo. The argument is for another day with. Other than you, you're just telling this story about whether Gitmo ought to be where these people go and await the reversal of Boumediene, and you don't even touch on that. But I do want people to know the people pushing for this are Lisa Monaco and John Brennan, because they've got the fallout of the Golani almost acquittal behind them. I'm glad you told that story. That Team Obama's not going to be happy you told that story, but I'm happy you told that story.
Golani's a really important story. Yeah, so Golani is the first and only Gitmo detainee ever tried in a criminal court, and he almost gets acquitted. He's tried for his role in the 1998 embassy bombings in Africa, and one of the witnesses, the key witness, gets thrown out because the U.S. only learned his name while Golani was in a black site under CIA interrogation. So that's thrown out, and the jury acquits him of 284 out of 285 charges. I gotta believe that the jury knew what they were doing by acquitting him on that one to make sure he didn't go free. But I don't know. But in any case, that was when they were trying to bring Spingool to the country to the U.S. for prosecution in 2011, 2012. The Golani trial was in everybody's mind because that was in 2010, and they were really, really worried. The people who opposed the extradition of Spingool to the U.S., that this would be another example, except this time it would go completely south. Because it's not easy to try terrorists in criminal court.
Now, all the evidence of the world far away, and something you brought out, which I very much appreciate. I've done 20 years, twice a year, talking to wounded soldiers in both long wars, and it takes a while for them to come and talk to me. They don't want to do it. There are a lot of people who do not want to cooperate with the prosecutors because they do not want to deal with the PTSD that comes with reliving that. Yeah. And I thought you dealt with that very carefully, very sympathetically, and so did the investigators. They understood. And I think generally people do understand. You agree with that?
I do, 100%. I mean, it's rough for these service members. It's rough when the prosecutors came. It's rough when I called or asked to meet with them, because you're basically saying, hey, will you tell me about the worst day of your life? The one that's, the day of your life that is responsible for why your marriage fell apart. The day of your life that is responsible for why you drink too much. And, they almost all of them cooperated with the prosecutors. Almost all of them cooperated with me. And I'm grateful, and I'm glad I was able to tell the story. And I have to say, Hugh, to this day, I'm still in touch with a lot of people from The Outpost, the book I wrote about Afghanistan, that came out in 2012. I'm obviously still in touch with a lot of the guys from this book, from Race Against Terror. And I cannot overstate how much these fights, these wars, these battles, even if people are not physically wounded, how much it just really wreaks havoc on their lives until the end of their life. And I just see it every day. One of the guys from The Outpost just took his life a few weeks ago. It's just absolutely horrible.
Well, I think there's a third book, because it's a trilogy, because the war on terror is still ongoing, and The Outpost is book 1, and this is book 2, which takes us up to 2013. And you got a lot of years left, so I hope there's a book 3 here. But Race Against Terror is in bookstores now. You ought to read it to find out the complexity and the wounding and the other side of trying to get people and put them into jail. Jake Tapper, thank you. We'll see you on CNN later today. It's a good day in the war on terror because there's peace in Gaza, but I'm very glad to talk to you on this day as well. Thank you, Jake. Don't go anywhere. I've got coming back on the other side of this, Senator, I think Kevin Kramer is coming up later in the show, and lots more on the deal left in the details about the deal are emerging still. The deal is going to take 2 days to unfold on Monday and Tuesday. That's a new bit of information. I mentioned it last hour. One of our great sponsors is the American Legislative Exchange Council, alec.org/Hugh, if you want the weekly State of the State newsletter. Their chief economist and president is my pal, Jonathan Williams, who I'll see down in Texas in December. Jonathan, Jack Chitterelli was my guest earlier this program. It just so happens you want to talk New Jersey today, and I'm glad to. Let me give you the setup. I asked Jack, I hear issue number 1 is property tax, number 2 is property tax, number 3 is property tax. He said 1 and 2 is right, but number 3 is the cost of energy. Boy, does New Jersey have a tale of woe to tell. Tell us about it.
Well, they sure do. And being up there yesterday, I can tell you, people are fed up about New Jersey and the way that they're going, right? When you look at their rank number 48 in economic outlook in our latest Rich States, Poor States report, some of the highest taxes, some of the most egregious regulations, worst policies across the board. And under Governor Phil Murphy, they've doubled down on the failure. They've raised taxes, they've raised spending even during the pandemic. And the thing that really caught me by surprise, Hugh, is, most of the country, the first thing they do is see what California does, and they do exactly the opposite and run as quickly in that direction as they can from doing the opposite of California. You actually have a governor in Phil Murphy there who says he wanted to become California East. Think about that for a second. And so should we be surprised when New Jersey now has lost more than 500,000 residents on net over the last 10 years because of this tax and spend formula? So I think people are looking for alternatives and doing something a little bit differently. I mean, the first step when you're a hole is stop digging it deeper. And I think that's exactly what they're looking to do, to address property taxes and begin to turn New Jersey around again.
If you're there and you can't avoid property taxes, and I got the stats you sent me, their top marginal personal income tax rate is 11.75%, 47th in the nation. Their top marginal corporate income tax rate is 9%, which is 43rd in the nation. And their property tax burden is 48th in the nation. I don't know how a Democrat is even competitive in that race.
Well, right, exactly. And, the strange thing about this all, Hugh, is that it wasn't that many decades ago, and New Jersey was a very prosperous place. In fact, you go back to the 1960s, New Jersey didn't have an income tax or a sales tax. Think about that for a second. They were New Hampshire in the 1960s. And then to deal with property taxes, they adopted income taxes and sales taxes. But the thing they forgot to do, Hugh, and we talked about this last week, is they forgot to stop the overspending by cities and counties that just have a new need for every last taxpayer dollar that's out there. And guess what? They could not ever control property taxes, even now with some of the very highest business and individual income taxes. I mean, it's a cautionary tale for the rest of America. But I think Jack Chitterelli, and I was with a lot of members of the Assembly and the Senate yesterday, they've got some great ideas to turn the state around.
Now, he came very close 4 years ago, surprisingly so. Now he's on everyone's radar. Will those 500,000 people who had the good sense to leave, will that hurt him or help him?
That's a good question of who they were. A lot of people were leaving for the tax reasons. But guess what? There's a new coalition developed, right? Because of Donald Trump's breakthrough. Donald Trump came within 5 points. Jack came closer than that 4 years ago. But even you start to see up in North Jersey, some of these Democrat local officials and machine politicos, I think that may be seeing the writing on the wall to say that New Jersey has to do something differently. So we'll see. It may shatter expectations when we get to November.
He was running through the Democrats who have endorsed him, and the energy costs are pretty stunning. I do want to move to the briefing that you gave the White House, you and Alec generally gave the White House on the government shutdown. What did you tell them? Because I think the Democrats are getting killed on this.
Well, we had a huge turnout of ALEC members where we heard from the White House today, Hugh, and they talked about what's the latest state of play up there. A lot of good questions from our ALEC members just as to how this government shutdown that's being pursued by Chuck Schumer and is really affecting states and, the budget shortfalls that it's going to create, the hardship that it's going to create around the FAA and airports, as we're already starting to see, even here at Ronald Reagan Airport in Washington, D.C. And then, of course, just I think the horrible issue around military pay that if we get into next week, I do think that the pressure is going to mount to say we want a government that functions. We want it to be open, and we have a nonpartisan, clean CR that's been passed by the House that Leader Thune brought to the Senate, couldn't get the 60 votes because of Chuck Schumer and a few of his progressive holdouts that wouldn't go for it. I mean, Democrat votes on both sides of the houses up there to keep the government open with the clean CR, something they voted for many, many times before. So I think we've got a situation of common sense, keeping the government open with the clean CR versus a radical left agenda for the future.
Yeah, I had Ro Khanna on, and the transcript is posted. Even he came around to the point. They voted for this so many times, they're going to get slaughtered. Jonathan Williams, you can find him on X at Tax Economist. You can go to ALEC, ALEC.org, and add my name, /U, ALEC.org/U, and get smart about what the states are doing with the American Legislative Exchange Council every single week. Thank you, Jonathan. Josh Kraushaar has walked with us over the last 2 years as editor-in-chief of the Jewish Insider. And I've been thinking, Josh, today about a lot of things after the announcement of the deal, including Rachel Goldberg-Pollen and John Pollen. Have you talked to any of the families of the hostages who have not made it back yet?
Yeah, I mean, look, we just had an interview with one of the released hostages who has been he's been speaking to the president, speaking to other media outlets. But I mean, the testimony of just the horrible, just awful, unthinkable treatment that these hostages have been through for over 2 years now, and then within days, God willing, they will be released and free. And this is really a remarkable deal. I don't think this necessarily. There's a lot of other parts of the Trump plan that are in the trust but verify column in terms of the rebuilding of Gaza, the governance of Gaza. But my goodness, just having reported on, talked to, heard the plight of the hostages who have been sitting in these dungeons of Hamas for the last 2 years. This is a remarkable moment, and it's one that I think you can't overstate the role that President Trump played in putting pressure on a lot of the interlocutors, working with Israel very closely, the military operations that put Hamas, that really degraded Hamas to the point where it cried uncle. It's a remarkable moment, and it doesn't mean that there's going to be peace in the Middle East. It doesn't mean that Hamas. I mean, I think the key thing going forward is ensuring that Hamas no longer has any role in governance of Gaza. That's going to be hard to do, and it'll be a challenge. But that's the next step. But insofar as the hostages being set free in the next few days, that is a remarkable achievement, and one that has required a lot of diplomacy, a lot of hard work.
The two keys, from my view, is Operation Midnight Hammer, especially the participation of the United States in destroying the nuclear sites in Iran, and then Israel's decision to strike the Hamas leadership, or try to, in Qatar, though I'm not sure how many of the Hamas leaders were killed. I think that brings peace through strength, the willingness to use force. And I expect that Israel's going to draw the same lesson about those who threaten it in the future. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely the case, Hugh. And you think about what the pre-October 7th reality that Israel was facing, where it was surrounded, and it was made just so plain on October 7th that it was not just the attack, but then the fact that you had Hezbollah to the north, you had the Iranian threat and the nuclear threat still being very real. You had Assad running Syria and allied with Iran. You had the Houthis to the south. You had Hamas still very much in place, obviously just completing that October 7th terrorist attack. Now you basically have all those enemies either degraded or destroyed. And those military successes, which people forget about very quickly. I mean, maybe not the pager attack, but just the hard work and the remarkable efforts from the IDF and Israeli intelligence taking out one by one the circle that Iranian-backed terrorist groups were causing towards Israel. And that pressure, and certainly the pressure against Hamas, which really, Israel never let up to the point where it really lost a lot of international goodwill and among some of its European allies. But they took the fight to Hamas. They degraded the terrorist group, and they put pressure on them to the point where this deal is quite a remarkable deal in that the hostages are going to be returned, but also Israel's maintaining some presence in Gaza for security reasons, and they're not going to, they're not going to give up their security interests in exchange. They're maintaining.
They have a lot of tunnels to destroy. My question, Josh, Israel's exhausted. That's objectively true, and the reservists have been called up 6, 7, 8 times. I don't think it's time to have elections. I think it's time actually to just take a deep breath and start up again. How long is it going to take to get back to normal, assuming that the deal holds? They're still terrorists, so I don't know that we can assume that, but assuming that it does hold and the hostages come home and the IDF holds 50% of Gaza, how long till Israel gets back to, quote, normal?
Well, the next step is sort of the so-called phase 2, the questions about a lot of the other points in the Trump peace plan, which include taking Hamas out of Gaza, finding making sure that there's a transition to a more technocratic governance structure, which is, far from assured. It's going to take a lot of hard work and efforts. But this is definitely the release. Once every hostage returns home, hopefully by the beginning of next week, it's going to be the beginning of the end in terms of that one awful chapter in world history, in Israel's memory. And I think it allows, at least psychologically, the Israeli public to move on, to focus. I mean, and you're right, Hugh, that the IDF, the reservists have been strained, to put it mildly. Israel's never been in this type of war posture for so long. And it's really put a strain on Israeli society. So just kind of getting closer to normal. I don't think we're ever going to, in the near term, get back to normal, given the scars in Israeli society. But we're getting closer to that point, and it puts closure on something that was it seemed like a never-ending scar.
I also assume that aid will flood Gaza, that if, in fact, Hamas is demilitarized, and that's a big if, that aid will flood into Gaza. Is that your expectation?
Well, that's the Trump plan. I mean, that's what's outlined in the deal. You also mentioned the politics too, Hugh, and this is clearly going to pass the Israeli. In fact, as we're speaking right now, the cabinet is discussing and about to vote on the plan, which is expected to pass overwhelmingly. But the problem politically for the prime minister is that if the very right-wing coalition partners, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, decide to pull out of the government, that could necessitate early elections and make it harder, for Netanyahu to get reelected or to have his party succeed in the next elections. So we'll see. Look, I think Trump said this at his cabinet meeting today, that Bibi may get a big bump from this deal, and we'll see how the politics shake out in Israel. But that's also going to be another step in this story in terms of, is there going to be a change in leadership?
Do you think there's any chance he might also just walk away and say, my job is done here. I've destroyed the Iranian nuclear threat. I've destroyed Hamas and Hezbollah. I'm 78 years old. Do you think he might do that?
It's interesting. I thought there were opportunities for the prime minister to do that after taking out Iran's, degrading Iran's nuclear program, call early elections. There were other off ramps if that was the move for the Israeli prime minister. My sense is that's not likely, but we'll see. And he's a political survivor, and he's someone who is beating the odds in Israeli politics, and it's going to be another test, politically at least, coming up soon.
If he wants to go out on top, now's the time to go out, because politics will be politics. Right now, he's riding high. Josh Kroshauer, thank you. Follow Josh on X at Josh Kroshauer. Again, a welcome to AM 1370 WHEE, Talk of the Town in Martinsville, Virginia. You get guests like Josh Kroshauer every week, people who know what they're talking about with specialty niches like Josh has. It is absolutely true that Israel has suffered greatly for 2 years. The burden has been so immense on, they do have a conscript army. Everyone serves in the IDF, but then you serve in the reserves, and no one in the, since the founding of the state in 1948 has had to fight in a war this long and this repeated number of call-ups. There's a lot of need in Israel, and that's where our friends at the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews have stepped up. They've opened up soup kitchens. They are feeding people in shelters. They are providing crucial equipment at hospitals and at bomb shelters. And you can help Israel recover with the donation to the IFCJ. There's a banner at hughhewitt.com where you can securely make a tax-deductible donation of anything, $25, $50, $100, $1,000. It all goes to Israel. You can call 800-492-1717. Josh mentioned President Trump at the cabinet meeting today. He didn't, I don't have any cuts of him talking about the deal, but he did make sure that he hit the media not covering it well. Cut number 4.
But it's really peace in the Middle East. And you remember October 7th was terrible, but also from the Hamas standpoint, they probably lost 70,000 people. That's big retribution. That's big retribution. But at some point, that whole thing has to stop, and we're going to see to it. Gaza is going to be slowly redone. You have tremendous wealth in that part of the world by certain countries, and just a small part of that, what they make will do wonders for Gaza, and I think you're going to see some tremendous.
That's the bottom line. It's going to do wonders for Gaza. We hope and pray, and they have suffered as well as the people of Israel. Remember the IFCJ. Let me close this hour by reminding you I'm in the Relief Factor studio. I have a studio wherever I go because of Relief Factor, and I take Relief Factor not because of the studio. I'll continue to take it long after I've retired, but because I get my miles in, and I recommend if you're going to exercise today, tomorrow, the next day, over the weekend, you get it too. The starter pack is $19.95. That's less than $1 a day for the 3-week starter pack. They lose money on every starter pack. They want you to try it because you'll be amazed at how the minor aches and pains that are bothering you right now, especially if you're commuting in your neck or your shoulders or your lower back or in your knees or your ankles, your elbows, it'll go away. Give it a shot. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. 1-800-4-RELIEF, or go find the starter pack at their website. Still $19.95, still less than $1 a day for 3 weeks. Take 3 a day for the first week, 2 a day for the second week, and then you're on the 1 a day like I am. I took it in the first hour. I remind you in every hour of every show. Get Relief Factor, and you can find it, that starter pack at relieffactor.com. relieffactor.com. As I've been saying all day, this is a big day. It's a historic day. The deal in the Middle East is going to be a moment that I'm going to remember for the rest of my life, and everyone's going to remember when it comes to pass on Monday and Tuesday. The question of why it comes to pass, I think, comes down to peace through strength, and I wanted to talk to someone who knows about that, so I asked Senator Kevin Cramer if he wouldn't join us. Senator Cramer represents North Dakota. He is a senior member of the Senate Committee on Armed Services. You got a lot of military men and women. We got to talk about the shutdown and whether or not they're going to get paid next week as well. But Senator, welcome. When you got the news about this deal this morning, did you go like I did immediately to the fact that Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu embody peace through strength, and that's behind the deal?
For sure, but Hugh, what's weirder is I first heard it from a reporter that in the gaggle coming to the Capitol that said, "Hey, did you hear about the deal?" And literally as it was happening, as it was breaking, and so. Yeah, I mean, what can you say? In fact, I started right away, of course, like you, thinking out loud in this case about just what a remarkable thing Donald Trump has done, and oh, so you think Donald Trump deserves a credit? Like, wow, how could you say anything other than that? Because yes, peace through strength, and frankly, Hugh. The fact that he demonstrates that strength in things other than just slogans, right? We all say peace through strength, and it is a bit of a slogan, but it also means something because it's also an attitude, and he has absolutely put the world on notice multiple times. You'd think they'd learn sooner that he is capable of doing what he says he will do, and he has the means to do it, and good for him.
You know, I think the key that unlocked this was when President Trump sent the B-2s, I don't know if they came from North Dakota or somewhere else, to do Midnight Hammer. And then when Benjamin Netanyahu tried to get the Hamas killers in Qatar and sort of told the whole region everything is fair game. All of a sudden, Donald Trump brought everyone to the table and got this done. Did those B-2s come from North Dakota, or were they somewhere else?
They did not. We have B-52s and we have some B-1s, but we don't have the B-2s. But having said that, there's no question. I mean, if you weren't already convinced by how effective the United States with Israel defended Israel when Iran sent hundreds of missiles at them, as we all recall that, not one really got through and did any damage. If that wasn't enough of a demonstration, Midnight Hammer certainly was. And like I said, peace through strength only works if you're willing to use the strength every now and then when the situation calls for it. So there's no question that was a loud message to our allies and our adversaries that Donald Trump means what he says and he does what he says. So I think that was a big deal. But beyond that, even I also combine that with his just showing up, Hugh. I mean, that's one of the things we sort of forgot about during the Biden years. When you have a president that shows up, and that doesn't mean just showing up at the easy places or the friendly places, but when you take trips to Saudi Arabia and Qatar and you talk to American military men and women in Qatar, when you have this open dialogue, even with your adversaries and your frenemies, you have a different bit of street cred to back up the diplomacy with, or to maybe to back up the strength with diplomacy. So I give him credit for all factions of what's happening.
You know, bluntness combined with unpredictability is its own deterrent, and he certainly has reestablished American deterrence. I don't think I'm out over my skis on that. I think it has been reestablished. Do you agree with that, Senator?
I absolutely agree with it, and we needed it, by the way. And now we need to continue to build on that as we've restored, the mantra of peace through strength. We need to make sure that we have the most modern, most lethal, most effective weapons systems in the world so that we never have to use them. Whereas Afghanistan, the weakness we demonstrated there under Joe Biden, that led the world to not think we were strong. And that's what led to things like Russia's invasion of Ukraine, China building up its military, Hamas going into Israel. These are not accidents. And so, yes, I think we've reestablished that, but I think we have to keep it going because the world is safer when America's stronger.
Now, I want to switch over to the shutdown. I first want to thank you for not bringing up the fact that your friend Carson Wentz beat my Browns on this weekend. We're just not going to talk about that and what he did to the Browns in London.
Can you show some highlights? I got some highlights.
No, we're not going to do any of that, especially that last drive. I don't know if you were watching that. I know he was in your basement a lot growing up.
I was texting Carson in the locker room. Believe me.
It broke a lot of your staff's heart. That's all I'll say. Let me talk a little bit about the shutdown. You do have a lot of military in North Dakota, and you know what I say, E1, E2, they make $2,300 to $2,700 a month. They cannot miss a paycheck, no matter where they live. Can the members of the Senate Democrats get their arms around that? They cannot let these kids miss a paycheck.
Hugh, I'm already surprised at how long they've shut down the government, considering how easy it is for Democrats to want to vote to fund the government. I mean, it's like falling off a log. So there's something different afoot here. But to this specific point you're making, I think we will not know the answer to that until we see what happens next Tuesday, when the actual deadline comes and they are confronted with a up or down, yes or no, black and white, binary choice. Yes, fund the government, or no, keep it unfunded and closed down, knowing that the ramifications will be military men and women making less than $2,500 a month will not be paid, or people making more than that will not get paid as a result of their decision to shut down the government. It is my hope that if nothing between now and then inspires them, that will be the inflection point where they say, okay, never mind. We need to fund this government. Now let's get to the negotiating table and start doing some real appropriating.
Now, a complete aside, Jen Kiggins, member of the House from Virginia, has introduced a bill. There's not enough time to get to it. It's easier to just open the government to pay military people through shutdowns. Do you think we ought to pass that as a backstop after this impasse is over?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and I think there are lots of things we should be doing to prevent this in the future. Ron Johnson has a bill to prevent the government shutdowns from ever happening. There have been a number of those bills. I do think we should institutionalize continuing resolutions as a part of coming up against the September 30th fiscal year end, and then have some incentives built in that prevent us from doing this ever again, or at least doing the level of damage that we're talking about. To have a standalone to fund the military through shutdowns, I think it's a noble idea. I'd be certainly open to seeing it, hearing it, debating it, having hearings. I will say that I wouldn't be supportive right now of doing it in this situation, because I do think with Democrats as dug in as they are, they have to be. They have to know that they hold the power to either fund the government or not, which means they hold the power to pay our military or not. And I just don't think there are enough hammers to get the Democrats to do the right thing here. So
Chuck Schumer,
I'm certainly open to it. It's noble. Yeah.
Chuck Schumer said we're winning every day of the shutdown. Now, I don't know if he's disconnected from reality or if he just doesn't care about these young men and women in uniform. But they're not winning every day. They're getting crushed every day. Do you talk to your colleagues in the cloakroom, and are they giving them the side eye? Because this is the worst political move I've seen in 35 years of broadcasting.
Well, remember, there was one other time when the shutdown was at the hand of Chuck Schumer, and it became the Schumer shutdown. And that was hard for him to take. It didn't last very long, but it was the first time in my history that Democrats have ever been blamed for shutdown. They are clearly not winning this one. I mean, because it's so obvious. Again, it goes back to that fundamental point. Funding the government's the most easy thing in the world for Democrats. It's what they love. They love the government more than they love anything, and funding it is intuitive to them. So I don't see where he thinks he's winning. And you've seen enough of the polling. I mean, you tell those military men and women next Wednesday, when we put up the continuing resolution to fund the government, for 6 more weeks or whatever the timeline would be, if Democrats are the only people voting no, and Republicans are the only people voting yes, you can't claim that you're winning. By the way, I don't think there are winners of government shutdowns, but I know what he means. This is not a political winner for him. And there are rank and file Democrats that are getting weary of defending the indefensible.
Yeah, John Fetterman, Angus King, of course, independent, but serious about defense. Others will come over. Senator Kevin Cramer of North Dakota, we love having you on, despite the fact that you're friends with Carson Wentz. Keep coming back, Senator. We enjoy it, and we appreciate your service. From Senator Cramer, I move on to Senator James Lankford. This senator is from Oklahoma, and he doesn't have a friendship with Carson Wentz, so I'm okay talking with him because he doesn't have anything involved in the Browns-Vikings game. Senator, welcome. I was just talking with Senator Cramer about the young E1s and E2s who don't get paid next week unless you reopen the government. You got a lot of those in your state as well. How do Democrats even look in the mirror cutting these kids off from their money?
I know, and I have so many Democrats I've talked to and said, you understand, even people that are contractors, these are janitorial services, food service folks, those folks already are cut off. So they're not going to get back pay. There are other folks that will get back pay if they're federal employees, but the contractors and these service folks, they're just losing it. So they're already people that are suffering the consequences that can't be fixed.
Now, you had 2 Democrats and Angus King, an independent who caucuses with him, cross over and join the Republicans to try and reopen the government. Has anyone else bolted yet? Because Chuck Schumer's taken him off the cliff.
No one else has bolted yet. There's been some really good conversations. Susan Collins is actually doing a lot of good work on the appropriation side to say, how do we actually pull this together? What can we actually get done to try to bring some Democrats along? There are some Democrats that are beginning to really expressed some concern about the actions that they're taking. Quite frankly, you remember during the first Trump administration, they shut down the government over a weekend over immigration. And then 4 days later, they reopened and said, okay, if we get a vote on something, we'll reopen it. We're trying to come back to them the same way and to say, hey, listen, for the sake of all these federal workers and their families, for the sake of all the members of our military that are stationed overseas, that their family members aren't going to get paid and trying to be able to take care of stuff while they're away, for their sake, why don't you reopen the government and let's keep negotiating? We'll give you a vote on something you want to vote on, but we got to get this government open again.
Senator Schumer, though, said they're winning every day. And that's a direct quote repeated by Leader Jeffries today in front of the House. How does he do that math? I mean, that would get me flunked in 7th grade algebra.
Yeah.
How do you come up with I'm winning every day when, in fact, the American people hate this?
I don't think he's winning every day by far. I heard him make that statement as well. I thought, how in the world can you say I'm winning every day, but members of the military, they're losing. I'm winning every day, but federal employees and their families are losing. I'm winning every day, but you can't get an answer from the IRS anymore because so many people are laid off. I'm winning every day, but you can't get a response sometimes on E-Verify if you're a private company trying to hire and you can't certify people. I mean, that's the kind of political inside the beltway conversation that makes people go crazy and say, hey, I'm just an American. Why can't an American government just run and function? Why does this have to be about democratic politics? I don't care if Chuck Schumer is winning. America needs to be the one that's actually winning.
One of your colleagues, Senator Sullivan, told me, I'm talking to it's Senator Rama here, told me last week that when a leader of a caucus begins to put their own political interest ahead of that of the caucus begins to mutiny. And he thought that was going to happen to Schumer because he's clearly worried about AOC in 4 years. Do you sense the same thing?
I can hope for the same thing. How about that? Schumer is worried about AOC. He's worried watching New York City and Mandami winning. He's watching New York and what is left of the people that haven't fled to Florida. He's watching it becoming more and more socialist and trying to figure out where he fits into all this. And so he's just going to go more and more socialist personally and see how far left he can go to please the progressives. The problem is that's not the rest of the country. It's certainly not the rest of his conference. And it's certainly not where America as a whole is, where we just voted for a very different direction as a nation.
Senator Lankford, if we reopen the government, they want to have a negotiation, which is fine. But what are we going to ask for? They want more money. They always want more money. And we can't spend that money. But do we get something like permit reform for pipelines? Do we get something for permit reform for exploration? Do we have something to get if we give them anything?
But right now, we're trying to just open the government and get appropriation bills are the key things. They're looking for this COVID subsidy to be extended. But it's interesting. It's not just that. When you look at the bill that they've got, it's $1.5 trillion. Hugh, they've got stuff in there like they want the ability for EV vehicles to be able to drive in the HOV lanes. They want new climate initiatives for overseas. I mean, it's just loaded with stuff. The healthcare portion is just the portion everyone's talking about. But when you actually go through the text of it, you see how many crazy ideas they're poking in there. So for us, it is, we don't want any of that. We just want to be able to get through the appropriations process to be able to get this. Now, if there's going to be some demand, it's entirely reasonable that we actually make a very clear demand, but that shouldn't happen now. That should happen only when the government opens.
I agree with that. Last question, Senator. Arctic frost came as a big shock to me, and I really mean that. I'm not easily shocked because I've been following government for a long time, but I've never seen more than a half dozen senators surveilled by the Department of Justice with no predicate. What's your reaction to that? I want a select committee like Watergate looking into what happened over there. That's crazy. How did you assess it?
Yeah, it is absolutely stunning. I serve on the Intelligence Committee. We are very careful on what kind of surveillance happens for overseas individuals, much less allowing the FBI and Jack Smith to be able to just troll through members of Congress and to be able to say that they're going to literally try to be able to track the phone records of sitting members of Congress, not with a specific thing they're looking for a criminal action for them. It was a fishing expedition to see if they could figure some things out on that. That is a entirely different level of weaponization of using their power and force. And right now, I have a lot of my Democratic colleagues that were screaming, President Trump's doing all these actions with the FBI. They suddenly got very quiet when they realized really what Biden and his FBI was really doing. As well they should. This should be something that doesn't matter who your party is, that should never be allowed on it, and we should actually do a full-on investigation.
Now, Senator, you're too young, but I'm the right age to have been in high school, suffering through summer school, watching the Watergate hearing because we had the basketball coach for a teacher. So for 4 hours a day, we watched the Watergate hearings, which was a select Senate committee. And sure enough, Alexander Butterfield showed up and spilled the beans about the taping system, and everything followed after that. But it took focus and a very good set of committee members like Howard Baker. You got a lot of great lawyers in the Senate. Has anyone talked about a select committee to focus on this? Because this can't happen again in America. This is really unprecedented.
Yeah, this can't happen again. So there has been some of the initial conversations. Obviously, Judiciary Committee would be the place where this would land. There's been some initial conversations on that. Chuck Grassley was the one that actually connected with the whistleblower to be able to get this out. So he has already started that process of pulling this information into the public. Then the next steps are the now what do we do to be able to make sure we're actually getting all the information. From a biblical perspective, I look at the verse that says what's whispered in the secret place will be shouted from the housetops. I'm a firm believer that the truth always does come out. It takes some time at times, but the truth will come out, and it's time to be able to pull this thread, and it doesn't matter who it's attached to, pull this thread and to be able to make sure something like this never, ever occurs again.
Thank you, Senator Langford. Don't give up on the Select Committee because I appreciate Senator Grassley, and Judiciary's got a lot of stuff to do. I just want singular focus on this. I appreciate your time very much, Senator Langford. Also appreciate all of you remembering we are running a fundraiser right now for the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. It's a great time to celebrate the peace deal in the Middle East. Head over to hughhewitt.com, go to the top, find the banner, be as generous as you can because the last 2 years have been a great and heavy burden on the Jewish state, and Americans of all faiths or no faith at all are stepping up to help continue to get people back to normal. People have been called up 6, 7, 8 times for reserve duty. They need help. You can make a tax-deductible contribution to the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews at the banner at the top of hughhewitt.com. There are a few clips I want to make sure you hear today, if nowhere else here. First of all, out of the blue, Prince William, future King of England, of Great Britain, with Eugene Levy in a random excerpt of their interview, cut number 23.
You all sit down at the dinner table together?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
yeah,
okay.
definitely. So sit and chat is really important. None of our children have any phones, which we're very strict about.
That is really interesting. So if your kids don't have phones to play with, what do they play with? What do they love doing?
So Louis loves the trampoline. So he is obsessed by trampolining, and actually Charlotte does a lot as well. As far as I can tell, they just end up jumping up and down on the trampoline, beating each other up most of the time. Apparently there is an art to it. Charlotte does her netball as well and her ballet. And so keeping them busy with sports and just being outdoors is really important. They're trying to learn musical instruments. I'm not sure how successful we're being with that. George loves his football, his hockey.
They're normal, but parents, don't give your kids phones. Listen to the Prince of Wales. Don't give your kids phones. Now I want to go to John Meacham, Joe Biden's speechwriter, used to be a historian who wrote down the middle books, but he's gone very left. He was on Morning Joe this morning, cut number 22.
One of the things about honesty and citizenship and a sense of, I would say, maturity about what people in a democracy should do is, even if someone with whom you disagree about 99 things does the 100 really well, you should say so, because that's what intellectual honesty is. And so all credit to President Trump and his, as you say, unconventional team. But if he takes an unconventional team, that's fine, right? I remember once asking the senior President Bush after something terrible had happened. It's a sign of something that I can't remember what it was after he'd been president. Something had happened in the Middle East. And I said, this is a man who spent decades dealing with this. I said, Mr. President, do you think this ever gets resolved? And he said, God, I don't know. That's what one of the most experienced diplomatic presidents in American history thought, is that it was an unknowable thing.
All right. I'm glad he said it. Good for you, John. More of that, please. More of that on Morning Joe. In fact, David Ignatius. Now, I've always thought David Ignatius is a very good reporter and a very good analyst. Worked for the Washington Post forever. And if he leans a little bit left, it's just tiny. And he is usually a very straight shooter on reporting. Cut number 21 on Morning Joe this morning.
It's so fascinating. As Elizabeth said, Israelis, their belief has been if anybody who's going to be able to resolve it would be Donald Trump. That's on the Israeli side of the ledger. I know you and I have been in meetings before together speaking with Arab leaders and Arab diplomats who say the same thing. Only Donald Trump can resolve this issue. He understands us. We understand him, which again, very unique that you're hearing that not only from the people in the streets of Israel, but also hearing that from Arab diplomats and leaders.
So, Joe, on the two sides of that, I can remember in the month or so after October 7, an Israeli senior official saying to me, we are so disoriented and traumatized by this war. The United States is going to have to make decisions for us. Joe Biden could never do that. And Donald Trump was able to do it, did it at the decisive moment when he said, essentially, this war must end, and Israel cannot annex the West Bank, which many right-wing Israelis wanted. In the same way, he reached out to the Arabs and said, I'm serious about peace, and began to work with them quietly. He sent Steve Witkoff, an unlikely emissary, but Witkoff developed an extraordinarily close relationship, in particular with the Qataris. And behind the scenes, they have moved week by week toward the deal that they announced a week ago, the 20-point plan. What's interesting about that, Joe and Mika, is that it took ideas from all over the Arab world, from the UAE, from Qatar, from Saudi Arabia, from Tony Blair in Britain, and pulled them all together into a single plan with the U.S. weight of support behind it. That's how we got here. And in each case, it's Trump deciding these people, endless combatants, cannot do it on their own. I'm going to intervene forcefully. Tragically, that is something that Joe Biden, for all his desire for peace, wasn't able to do.
Good for David Ignatius as well. It is a mark of intellectual honesty, as John Meacham said. When you can spell it out, doesn't happen without Donald Trump. What do people with TDS do? They'll deny that, and they ought to see therapists. Jim Talent was senator from Missouri, congressman from Missouri. He's now on the board of the Reagan Institute, the leadership board. Senator Talent, welcome back. I am curious, at the beginning of the war, after the invasion of Hamas into Israel, it was often said you can't defeat an ideology. And I've always responded, there aren't any Nazis in Germany that have power anymore. Imperial Japan is now a very great ally of the United States. South Korea has been rebuilt from the ashes of that long war, and they are a democracy and vibrant. Do you think that the destruction of Gaza, and it is about 90% destroyed, and this deal offers hope for that region to actually come back in a renewed and vibrant way?
Yeah, I do, Hugh. It's the first real hope that I've seen since probably Operation Desert Storm. It's a triumph of Israeli arms and American diplomacy backed up by the skillful use of American economic and the targeted use of American military power. So yeah, I do think there's hope. And you know, you can't necessarily destroy an ideology, but you can destroy armies. You can destroy insurgents, you can destroy terrorists, and Israel's done a pretty good job of that. So I think at this point, I mean, the most relevant fact is that the United States and Israel will be in control of what happens in Gaza going forward. And as long as the president can keep his Arab partners behind him, I think there's a pretty good chance of a for the first time in generations, a decent outcome for the people of Gaza.
Now I want to ask you about why Donald Trump has credibility at the diplomatic table. I'm going to be on special report later tonight, and I've been thinking, I'm sure we'll talk about this deal. One of the reasons Trump can be believed is by the Arabs, by Hamas, and by Israel, is because not only did he take out Soleimani 5 years ago, but he exercised Operation Midnight Hammer. And people forget, after Midnight Hammer, he told Prime Minister Netanyahu to pull the planes back, and they did. And I think that gave him enormous credibility with our Arab negotiating partners. Do you?
Yeah, there's no question. I've heard you say that on the show today, and I think you're right. I think the president learned from the targeted action against Soleimani that the targeted and purposeful use of American power on behalf of clear American objectives gains respect in the region. You mentioned the fact that he exercised constraint over Israel at the right time. You haven't mentioned, but could have mentioned, his trip to Saudi Arabia, where he used American economic power, the prospect of cooperation with the United States and prosperity in the region, at the same time as he sent a message to the Arab world that, look, we're not going to tell you what to do with your domestic political institutions. So what we have here is a president with consistent policy behind an understandable strategic purpose, who knows how to use and coordinate the tools of American power. And he saw the ally in Israel. He saw what Israel was doing, and he took advantage of it. It's similar to the way HW coordinated basically the coalition behind Operation Desert Storm. It's just it's a triumph of American diplomacy, and it is interesting to hear the commentators on the left deciding, well, maybe there is something to this Donald Trump guy after all. That's funny.
It also
Funny to listen
reminds
to
me,
him.
and you have to be as old as we are to remember this, Nixon's intervention in Yom Kippur War in '73 ended with the Soviets out of the Middle East. The Russians are now out of the Middle East again. I hope the Chi-Coms don't come in behind them. I don't think they will. But do you think that the Middle East might actually become an oasis of stability and trade now?
Oh, I think you mentioned yes, I think I would hesitate to say that the Middle East is ever going to be an oasis of anything, but I think there is now a real possibility of building an equilibrium around a partnership with Israel, Jordan, Egypt, the Gulf states, coordinated by the United States. And I think the Chinese are looking at this with a great deal of dismay. They bet on the wrong horse. They've cozied up to Iran, possibly at Russia's suggestion, and Iranian power and influence has been broken. After many, many decades where they tried to maintain a neutral stance with Israel, they've alienated the Israelis, and the Israelis are now the hegemon of the region. So right now, all the Chinese are trying to do is get as much oil as they can illicitly out of the Iranians and trying to figure out what to do.
So the distance traveled from 10/7, almost 2 years and a week ago, to today it would not have been possible to sit on a panel and say, in 2 years, I think Netanyahu will lead Israel to this, and this. I think he might want to retire now and avoid the Churchill election of '45. What do you think?
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that, because I think he's initiated the basic direction. And I think there probably are people who could succeed him. That's obviously a decision he has to make. He is, however, he's a person who wants to serve. He's obviously dedicated to the state of Israel. And I think the prospect of being able to win this election, and I imagine he can now win this election, if those hostages come back over the weekend or by Monday, from what I've seen of Bibi Netanyahu, my guess is that he'd run again. And then maybe if he wins, continue to work with President Trump in Gaza and perhaps leave after a year or two after that. If I had to guess you, I think he's going to want to be vindicated by a successful election.
He's a remarkable statesman, And I know people have told me in Israel, he's much more hated than Trump is in the United States by the left in Israel. And I don't understand why, but I accept it as a given that he is. When you're on top, sometimes you do what Jimmy Brown did and you walk off the field as the greatest ever. Last word to you.
Yeah, he could do that, but how much better to get an election, defeat your enemies one more time, and then leave more or less at a time of your own choosing. Remember, if he were to leave now, there would be arguments that, well, he couldn't have won. Plus which, I think he wants to at least get this second phase of negotiations in Gaza off the ground. So I don't know.
You're probably right
that's
about
a good
that.
question.
You're probably right. Jim Talon, always good to talk to you, Senator. Follow him on X at Jim Talon. I'm in the Relief Factor studio, and I want to begin the close of the show by reminding everyone I take this every day, and tomorrow morning I'm going to be very glad because I did nothing today except listen to a bunch of podcasts and read a lot to prepare for special report tonight in the program today in order to be able to talk coherently about this major history-making diplomatic deal in the Middle East. But I'll get my miles in tomorrow, and I'll be able to listen to everything, including the new Ask Aviv Anything podcast, which dropped today. I'm sure the editors dropped today. Commentary will drop another issue tomorrow. I'll listen to that podcast as well. I'll get my miles in, and then I'll have the Weekend Review show tomorrow, and we'll talk about it with Continetti and Dominich and Eli Lake and John Ellis. It's a big day, but it's made possible by Relief Factor, and my miles are made possible by Relief Factor. So if you're an exerciser, you're a trundler, you're a runner, whether you're a racer or you're just a plodding person like me and you just trundle along, or you go to the gym or you swim or you row or you sail, whatever you do that involves exercise, you'll get minor aches and pains, bumps and bruises. Take Relief Factor. All right, it works. Call them at 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief. Ask for the special 3-week starter pack, $19.95, less than $1 a day. Or go over to their website and find that starter pack again, $19.95 for 3 weeks, less than $1 a day. Follow the directions. You'll love it. I take it every day on air, so you see me do it. Love the product. Go to their website to get it, relieffactor.com. Here's Chuck Schumer on the floor of the Senate, cut number 6.
Each day, our case to fix health care and end the shutdown gets better and better, stronger and stronger.
Every day, we get closer and closer to cutting off the pay for the E1s, E2s, who are living paycheck to paycheck in the military because of the grandstanding clown show that is Chuck Schumer. Here is Mike Johnson on C-SPAN this morning, cut number 8.
Hi. I just want to start by saying, hearing you say that everyone is smiling in the cities where troops, our National Guard, has been rolled into, feels dystopian and insane to hear you say that, watching the response to this. But that's not actually my question. My question, I just needed to say that while hearing you talk about this. My question is, if Republicans and Democrats can agree to a 1-year extension to the ACA subsidies, removing this sort of talking point of illegal immigrants draining our resources as you sit here and lie about this, would you support that bill and bring it to a vote on the House floor? This is a big question that I have for you. Thank you.
Yeah, well, not lying. I'm telling you the truth, and you can go look at all the documents yourself. Don't look at Republican paperwork. Look at the Congressional Budget Office, who said at least 1.4 million illegal aliens draining the resources from Medicaid, which is why you put their forms into law and got it signed July 4th. Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries' counterproposal for the CR would reverse all that. Look at page 57, section 2141 of the bill that they filed. I made it easy for you. Go to speaker.gov, my website. It's right there on the homepage. See for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Look what they wanted to do. But with regard to whether or not the subsidies could be extended for a year, Hakeem Jeffries came out yesterday and said that is a non-starter. You have to ask him why he said that. I'm not sure. But he and I both know that we have a lot of work to do within our respective caucuses to build consensus.
The speaker is so calm and so good. God bless him, and he's going to be speaker a long time, I think, because Republicans and independents don't want to go crazy.